What if I told you that most people that use GLP-1s are never actually on the same dose twice, despite the number that's on the pen? And what if I told you that that might be why so many people struggle with these medications and eventually give them up? If you've ever felt amazing on a GLP-1 and then terrible the next week, even though your dose didn't change, you're not crazy. You are actually just experiencing something that likely your doctor never discussed with you. Today's conversation completely changed the way that I look at GLP-1s and dosing. Because what if the problem that we're running into isn't the drug that we're on, but the way that we are dosing and titrating that medication? On today's episode, Dr. Ian Ellis talks about his own journey, a journey of having obsessive control to losing control, and ultimately discovering something along the way that could reshape the way that we view GLP-1 dosing. And it all comes down to one core idea. What if it's not about the dose that you're on, but the level that you're at? If that has you curious, you're going to want to stick around for this entire video because this conversation is an absolute game changer and reshaping my own approach to GLP-1 medications. Now, it's important to understand that Dr. Ian is a doctor, but he is not your doctor, and this video is not medical advice. It's simply something like everything we bring you here at On the Pen that is designed to empower you to have a more competent and confident conversation with your doctor. So before we get started, hit the like, hit the bell, but make sure you're subscribed for updates because we bring you all the GLP-1 news and updates that matter for you on your journey. Thanks for What if you've been on a GLP-1, but you've never actually maintained the appropriate dose? What do I mean by that? Well, what if despite following the protocols to a T, your body has experienced something entirely different than what was expected? Well, that's what our guest today, Dr. Ian Ellis, set out to explore based upon his own journey. And in doing so, it developed this idea that really what we should be paying attention to is not the dose that we're on, it's the level that we're at. And I thought that this was a super apropos conversation for the things that we've been talking about it On the Pen. So I want to welcome in today's guest, Dr. Ian Ellis. Dr. Ian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a true privilege.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, reaching out, and I'm so excited about what you are working on there at VoaFit. And I think that what you have discovered here could be an absolute game changer for people who are on the pen and people who in the future will be on the pen, something that this space has long needed. So when we talk about your level and not your dose, can you tell us sort of how this all came about in your mind, Dr. Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. So this really starts, from a position not being, coming at this from the perspective of a physician as much as a patient myself. So, long time ago, before I ever got into medicine, I was a certified personal trainer, worked as a nutritionist. I've always had a very intense interest in maintaining a healthy body composition and helping to solve this, global problem of obesity and overweight, and noting in the people in my own life, including my own family, just how difficult a problem that was to solve. Okay, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when thin was really in. Everyone was on a diet all the time. And at least in my personal experience of the people around me, no one was really achieving any success in that, right? And I have a very distinct memory when I was 14 years old. I was standing in front of a mirror, just a young teen, and looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm not going to lose this battle that I see everyone else in my life fighting and losing. And so really from that moment forward, started dedicating my own life to that. Coming from this is pre-internet, right? This is coming from not a significant position of special knowledge, just saying, I'm going to try really hard and I'm going to have enough willpower to succeed. I'm going to eat the right foods. I'm going to exercise the right way, and I'm going to win this battle myself. And I'm going to teach a lot of other people how to do that too. Okay. So that's where I started, became an athletic training major in college and was kind of moving towards that as my career. Kind of fell into medicine late. I didn't, start pre-med until midway through college, and eventually became a board certified ER physician. And that's kind of what I was doing full-time for my career, but still at the same time, really having a focus on my own physique and the physique of, people around me. Okay. Well, here was the challenge. Before medical school, I would say that externally, I achieved a great deal of success in that arena. You looked at me, I was, maintaining a body fat percentage somewhere between 8 and 12. I looked the part of a finely tuned athlete. I was, training athletes myself and training people in the gym and, preaching the same mantra we've all been preached to, which is just eat right, eat the right things, eat the right amount, calories in, calories out, exercise, and everything will take care of itself. Okay. Well, externally, I looked fine. Internally, absolutely not fine at all. Like really toxic obsession with food, with calorie counting, with obsessive restriction, over exercising to compensate for my appetite when I would lose control, running marathons the day after Thanksgiving. Literally, I did that to burn the 2,600 calories I had meticulously counted in the MyFitnessPal app that I would have to deal with somehow, some way. And just generally living that very difficult, obsessive place of trying to win that battle when the deck is really stacked against all of us. In the Western world, with the Western food supply, with our lack of daily physical activity, with the nutritional deficiencies we have in the processed foods that we eat, the environment we are in is simply not conducive to achieving health. Okay, so what do people do? This is just statistically true. They either try to keep some balance in their life, maintain their relationships, enjoy their food, enjoy their travel, try to keep some perspective, and generally end up overweight or obese. Okay, 75% of people, that's the case. The other 20 to 25%, this is where I would count myself in before. You sacrifice all of these things. You sacrifice, good food, family time, relationships, balancing your life and pursuits, going on vacations, doing those kind of things that give life its flavor in exchange for dedicating your life to the pursuit of fitness. Okay. Well, I'm here to tell you, neither of those are acceptable, right? We have to find a way as individuals and in our society to have both. How can we have balance, enjoyment of life, and also be healthy and fit? Because I shouldn't have to choose, and I don't want to choose. Okay. Well, here's where I'm going with this. I chose option B for most of my young adult and adult life until I went to medical school. Because in medical school and residency as a medical professional, I didn't have the choice anymore of making that choice because I was working 120-hour weeks. I was not able to over-exercise to compensate for my excessive appetite. I wasn't able to cook and prepare my natural whole foods at will because I'm eating, cupcakes at the nurse's station, whatever you can grab when you're in the middle of a 36-hour call. Okay. And I lost the ability to compensate for the difficulties of our environment through excessive exercise activity and over restriction. Well, what was the outcome of that? I became what I most feared. I went from 6 to 8% body fat to 40 pounds overweight, 35% body fat, snoring like a freight train, and couldn't walk upstairs without getting out of breath. That's the state I was in when I graduated residency as someone with a career background in fitness and nutrition. Okay.
Can you give us just a rough idea of like what year this is?
Oh yeah. So I graduated residency in 2016 and kind of started my process of trying to get back to a state of health in 2017, kind of when I finished up fellowship. Okay. Well, the only thing I knew how to do at that time was jump right back in after I had graduated into the same environment I was before. So I got back on the treadmill 3 hours a day. I hired a trainer and was working out twice a day, 6 days a week with a trainer that would drive an hour from Dallas each way, to whip my butt into shape in the driveway. Okay. And, jumped right back into that same obsessive focus to try to get back to this place of health. Okay. But it wasn't okay because now I'm married. Now I had a kid, actually several kids, and I had a career that required my attention. And I also had friends and other things that were really important parts of my life. And I started to feel that tension acutely, like this method of getting to that place of health is no longer viable. I
Mhm.
can't do that because there's too much sacrifice. Okay.
Right.
But I don't want to end up in the 75% that are overweight or obese. So what could be the solution? Okay. Well, that brings us to 2022, or actually, I think it was the end of 2021, when a colleague in the ER who, was probably sick of me just complaining every day on shift of how hard it was to not eat, okay, mentioned, hey, I've heard of this new drug. It's called Ozempic. And I coming from the place of working the ER, this is right in the beginning before this kind of got mainstream. Never heard of it before. And I said, what is it? Tell me about it. What's the big deal? And they said, well, I mean, I hear you just take it and it takes away your appetite and you can just lose weight. And I said, well, what do I need to know about it? They said, nothing. It's magic. To which I said, sign me the frick up. Okay. Because I'm tired. I can't fight this battle anymore. I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting people around me. And I can't whipsaw between these two extremes any longer. So it was really like, if this tool exists, please let me try, because I want to find that place of balance in the middle where I'm not fighting my appetite tooth and nail every second of every day to maintain a healthy weight. Well, that provider prescribed it to me. I got the standard dosing schedule. I got my meds in the mail, and I started 0.25 milligrams of semaglutide. A day later, I don't want to overstate this. It was like the doors of heaven opened up, because all of a sudden, and I didn't even perceive it at the time. I just got up, I went through my daily activities, I started to make lunch, and I remember it so distinctly. There was a ribeye sandwich that I made, like just the most tasty, delicious, succulent, perfectly cooked, meat, and a sandwich that I honestly would have in the past eaten one of, probably eaten two of, maybe eaten another half, and then gotten on the treadmill for 3 hours to burn off the calories. Okay. And I took my first 3 bites, and I got halfway through the sandwich, and I just didn't want to eat it anymore.
Wow.
And I wasn't feeling sick. I wasn't feeling overstuffed. I just didn't have the desire to keep eating. And almost without thinking about it, well, actually, that's not true. I recognized as it was happening. I wrapped it up and I put it in the fridge, and I went, what the hell was that? Is this what it's like to feel satiated? Is this what it's like to feel like my appetite is satisfied when I haven't overeaten and stuffed myself to the point where I just can't eat anymore? Mm-hmm. And, that continued for that week. And, the scale started to move. I still had good energy. I was feeling really great, still eating high quality food and just kind of moving through the week. Well, I took my second dose. The day after that, I didn't feel quite so good anymore. Okay. I was developing a slight food aversion. It's like we all know what that looks like. You look at food and you go, I really don't think I can eat that. And I certainly don't want to. And when I would, because I knew I had to eat something, I would start to feel that, little tinge of nausea, a little bit of reflux, stomach's a little overfull, just not having that blissful experience, but still good, right? I'm still losing weight, still in a calorie deficit, no big deal. Week 3, I started to feel really sick. I had quite a bit of nausea. I started having some diarrhea. I started to have some low energy because I really wasn't eating much at all. Okay, it was really restricting my calories. I'm still trying to go to the gym like I normally would, and my performance is starting to suffer. Okay, well, that continues until I hit week 5. Okay, week 5, the wheels of my semaglutide journey fell off completely because I got really sick, just intractable nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, couldn't eat, couldn't function.
And you never dosed up during this time.
Well, I increased. I took 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, and of course, following the directions I was given, I increased to 0.5 in week 5. Okay?
So you did increase. Okay.
Yeah, but progressively having a worse and worse experience, even on the same dose, and this is critical. We'll come back to that. Even on the same dose, my experience was changing from day to day. Okay. Well, here's the bottom line. I continued to escalate because that's just the way it was prescribed. I stayed off and on sick for quite a long time after that, but the scale was moving. The weight was falling off. I certainly wasn't fighting my appetite. I was fighting different battles,
right?
But making progress. Well, I got to the end 3 months later, and I'd lost about 30 pounds, which was the 30 pounds that I had been, really fighting with tooth and nail for quite some time, feeling pretty good in terms of the outcome. Then I got on an in-body scanner, which is a body composition scanner, similar to DEXA scan, and really does have, when you do it right and consistently, it's a really accurate measure of your body composition. Well, I have one of those in my house, in my office here. And so I have years of data going back, what my average body composition is. When I lose weight, where does it stay? What is the ratio of fat loss to muscle loss? And just knowing what that was like without medicine. Okay. I get on the scale, 30 pounds down, absolutely horrified by what I saw, because I had lost 30 pounds, 2 pounds of lean mass for every 1 pound of fat I had lost. And my body fat percentage, that oh so important metric, had barely changed. I was smaller, but I wasn't, by that metric, much healthier. I certainly was weaker, and I had nowhere near the physique I had had in the past when I reached that weight during a cut. And this is coming from a bodybuilding background where I had done bulks and cuts, many, many times over the years. Okay. Well, I looked at that. I took a step back and I went, oh my gosh, like I see the dichotomy here. These medicines have the potential to be world changing, to solve this appetite problem that is so intractable. But this can't be the outcome. We can't accept a population, and I couldn't accept within myself, a population that's just smaller and weaker, but has the same body fat percentage, right?
Yeah.
And of course, then I put my personal trainer, nutritionist brain back in my head, and I went, well, it's obvious why this happened. I haven't eaten in 3 months. And when I have eaten, I was too sick to get protein in. So I'd eat simple carbohydrates because they made my stomach feel good. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to the gym, I wasn't exercising with the same intensity to remind my muscle to hang around. And I was really getting overall really poor nutrition. So it's not like it was like, oh my goodness, what happened? It's like, well, it's obvious why this happened. But can these medicines be used in a way where that isn't the outcome? And I became really obsessed with that answer because I was not willing to go back to not being on the medicine and fighting that battle every day. That was not an option.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm so glad that you've highlighted this, especially with the fact that the medication it was doing what it was supposed to be doing, in the sense that you were taking in less energy, right? And this is where I get really concerned for the fact that these drugs are opening up to the Medicare population over the next few months, is because without doing this the right way, if we get a bunch of older patients to lose weight, but the bulk of that weight comes from lean mass, then arguably the health outcomes could be worse.
It would be a catastrophe. And that's not overstating it at all. The elderly population, particularly those that don't exercise, don't have lean mass to spare,
right?
But they do have fat tissue to lose. So it's a medical imperative to treat this population, but it's equally as imperative to find a better way to do it,
right?
Because they can't take the risk. I'll give an example, like a real example, and I can say her name because she's given me permission many times. Her name is Pat May. She's one of my favorite patients. She came to me in true desperation. Okay, she's mid-60s. She had severe osteoarthritis in both knees, immobile, 310 pounds at 5'0". Okay, so BMI way north of 50, and multiple medical comorbidities, heart issues, kidney issues. She's just been in the hospital for kidney failure and sepsis. Wow. Okay, well, that is a person who is excluded from the trials. A typical doctor on the standard protocol would recognize this person can't tolerate any side effects. And yet, we have to treat her. It's like, if we don't get that weight off, she's at the end. Okay, unless you can get that person to a healthy weight, because she needed bilateral knee replacement surgery, which she was disqualified for because of her BMI. Okay, she's also not qualified for bariatric surgery because of her comorbidities. Okay, so what is the option for her? The option based on the standard dosing protocol is, sorry, good luck. Hope you do okay. All right, well, I'll get into how we treated her successfully, but I'll jump ahead to the punchline. A year later, we did treat her. We treated her precisely based on level, not based on dose. We'll get into that in just a moment. She's lost over 100 pounds. She's nearing 200. She already got one of her knee replacement surgeries, and she's on track for her second this next month. So this is a real person who's being treated actively now. Well, we have to figure out a way to treat that population safely. Yeah. Okay. And the standard dosing ladder doesn't let us do that. Okay. So, that brings me back to the beginning. Well, I was thinking and evaluating my own experience. And I went back to that first week and I went, man, that felt great. If I could feel like that every day, that would be perfect. Okay. That would give me that balance that I was looking for. Week 2, I wasn't feeling quite as good, progressively felt worse and worse. And then week 5, I got really sick. Okay. So I dove into the pharmacokinetics because I wanted to understand, like I had to solve this problem and I had to figure out a way to have that week 1 experience every time. Okay. Because I was confused. I took the same dose each week, but I had a different experience. And why is that? Well, if you look at the pharmacokinetics and you just understand what's happening in your body, it makes perfect sense. Okay. These medicines, I know your listeners are familiar, at least to some degree, with the concept of half-life. These medicines last a long time. If I were to sneak up behind you and you're a GLP-1 naive patient and I inject you in, your shoulder with semaglutide, okay, that medicine would reach a peak within 24 to 48 hours, but it would still be in you a month later, okay? In a week after that injection, half of it would still be there. Another week after that, another half is still there. So it's rapidly absorbed and it's slowly metabolized. Okay. But follow this. And you can scroll down there. It's great. So go up to that first one, actually. There we go. So that's a typical curve for semaglutide. It's rapidly absorbed and then has a long tail. Okay. A week in, okay. And you can see there, I think you can see on the screen, 7 days in, there's a lot left. Half of it on average is left in your body. So when you take that second dose, go ahead and go down to the next slide. When you take that second dose, you're not starting from 0. There's still half left. I'm going to use round numbers. Semaglutide is dosed in fractions of a milligram, so I'll just use round numbers for ease of conversation. Let's say you take a milligram on day 0, and day 7, there's half of it left. So you take another milligram, same dose. Thanks, doc. I felt great that first week. Well, joke's on you, because now you've increased your level of medicine by 50%. There's 1.5 milligrams in you now. Well, that becomes metabolized slowly. That reaches its peak within 24 to 48 hours. And now it's time to take your third dose. Same dose. Now you're like, man, I don't feel that good. I'm glad I'm not increasing my dose. But you are. Unbeknownst to you, your third dose stacks and your fourth dose stacks. So you have 4 different therapeutic levels of that medicine, even at fixed dosing for that first month. Okay,
yeah, I hope that people catch what you're saying here, because when you start the medication, you have 0 in your system, but the half-life of semaglutide is 7 days, and semaglutide has how many half-lives? Many, right?
Yeah, it takes 5 half-lives at least for it to be completely metabolized.
So we're talking 4 weeks into dosing, you still have some of your first dose in your system, so to speak. So you are layering these doses as you go up. So the chart that we're looking at here, Dr. Ian, is going from 0 medicine over on the left to taking the first dose, to that second spike is the second dose, and that third spike is the third dose. And you see the levels are rising in your bloodstream, but the dose is staying the same.
Precisely. And that explains beautifully my own experience. First week felt great. Well, that peak, that first peak, that was the level of medicine, the level of medicine effect on my body that I needed. Okay. It would be crazy to go to your doctor and say, I feel great on this dose. It's perfect. Can I have more? You should say, that feels great. Let's hold there until I need more.
Pause. Where we're at.
But the standard dosing protocol, because of the pharmacokinetics, does not allow for that. The second dose will increase your level, and the third dose will increase your level. And right as it's about to stabilize around dose 5 is when you reach steady state. What does the standard dosing protocol say to do? Double your dose. Okay, so now you take that same dosing ladder where you've had accumulation over time, and you say, I'm actually going to do twice that. Well, where does that put you? By week 5, you're at 3 times the medication level as you were in week 1. Okay, here's what I want you to see, since you brought up this graphic here. That green line is a theoretical therapeutic window. Okay, a therapeutic window is a concept in medicine where there's a top range of medicine effect where if you go beyond that, you don't get more benefit, you get more side effects. And below that, it doesn't work. So for any medical intervention, you want to stay in that band where you're getting maximal effects and minimal side effects. An easy example we can all understand is ibuprofen. Okay, you have a fever. You need to take enough to get your fever down. Okay, but not so much that if your fever's already down and you take more, you're just going to tear up your stomach. Okay, but you also have to take enough. If I take, if the typical therapeutic dose of ibuprofen is 200 milligrams, if I take 20 milligrams, it's probably not going to do much. So everyone has an individual therapeutic window for a GLP-1 where they feel their best. What do I mean by that? Their appetite is controlled. They still get hungry, but when they eat, they feel full fast. They have good energy. They don't have GI side effects, and they can move forward. Okay. The problem is the standard dosing ladder inexorably, inevitably steps people up progressively and never gives them the chance to hold. Okay. Now, this is why, and I want to give credit to the ladder. It wasn't done maliciously. It's a brilliant design for a study to gradually move people up to defined levels to assess efficacy. Okay, that's what the trial was designed for. And it did that really well. It escalated people gradually to a steady state at 0.25, at 0.5, at 1, at 1.7, at 2.4. So it gave us a great snapshot. Does it work on a population level at this fixed dosing? Okay, there's nothing wrong with that in a trial. In fact, I don't know that I would do it any other way. But for an individual, it never asks, the trials never ask the question, what is the right level for an individual person? What is the level that makes you feel your best? And if you can find it, how do you stay there? Okay, the studies didn't ask. And because they didn't ask, they didn't provide a question. Well, in a perverse turn of events, we applied a study designed beautifully for the New England Journal of Medicine to individual patients, no matter how tall they are, no matter how big they are, no matter how old they are, no matter their starting point. And we say everyone gets on the same escalator and try to make it to the top, right? That's what you were told. Okay, let's get you to 15 milligrams because that's the greatest efficacy on a population level. Okay, here's the tragedy of that. A lot of people don't need 15 milligrams. A lot of people don't need 5 milligrams. Some of my patients, and this is real patient, real data. Her name is Mary Alice. She came to me. She's 30 years old. She'd been trying to lose, 20 pounds without success for quite a long time. And she warned me. She said, Doc, I'm really sensitive to medicine. Okay, I'm really scared of side effects. I've heard a lot of bad things about GLP-1s. And I said, well, let's take the standard dose, which was 2.5 milligrams, which was Zepbound. Let's cut it in thirds. Let's start you on literally a third, less than a milligram. Okay, well, wouldn't you know? She wasn't lying. She was really sensitive. She got super sick. Okay, she didn't leave the bathroom for a week.
Wow.
Well, what would the standard dosing ladder say to do? Well, first of all, they would have started her on 2.5. Can you imagine what her experience would have been? But what they would say is, well, let's hold it there. Well, guess what? If we had held it there, the next week she'd have been higher. The next week she would have been higher. The pharmacokinetics don't change just because your dose decreases. Okay, so here's what we did for her. Here's what we did for Pat May, and here's what we did for myself. Go back 6 months from that period of time. When I realized that the pharmacokinetics result in inevitable progressive escalation of levels, the question was just burning into my mind. Can I figure out where I am right now based on all my previous doses, based on when I took them? Can I figure out a number This is my level right now. This is how much medicine is in my body right now at this moment. Okay. If you could figure that out, what is the dose? This is so critical. I hope everyone is listening right now. What is the dose if I'm down here because my body has metabolized some of that medicine and I've established this is the level at which I feel the best? What is the dose to get me back to here? Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up. We've established that green band is the therapeutic window. That's where I feel my best. What would this patient's experience be in this scenario, which is hypothetical? The first dose, their level wasn't high enough. They didn't have adequate hunger suppression. And of course, they didn't experience side effects because they never reached a therapeutic level. The second dose, that's that magical day, right? You're in your green zone. Your appetite is suppressed. You're not above it, though. So you're not experiencing a lot of side effects, but you get hungry on day 5. How many of us have had that experience, right? You have a day or so where you can't eat that much, 3 or 4 days where you feel great, and towards the end, the medicine wears off, and you go, man, I really hope Monday comes quick so I can take my next dose, right? Well, what if you could say, I need to take a dose right now. I'm hungry. But how much do I need to take to get right back to where I was? Because the week before, I felt great. Mm-hmm. Why would I take the same dose and escalate above that? Because there's nothing but badness that's going to happen. You already have adequate hunger suppression. So what's going to happen is you're going to experience side effects for no reason, or you're going to force your body to adapt to a higher dose when it doesn't have to. Mm-hmm. And that is so important, because if you force your body to adapt to higher and higher levels, your body starts to need that level of medicine to maintain adequate control. Okay, so that's the question. Can you find your own ideal level of medicine? If you can find that, can you calculate how much do I need to take at any moment in time to get me right back there? Okay, yeah. And when I found that level over time, you can see in the graphic here, they have that consistent dose over time where they stay in their therapeutic range. They're feeling good every dose, and they're having that first day experience that I wanted back every day. Okay. Well, what happens next? Your body will adapt. You're losing weight. Your body changes. Your insulin sensitivity is improving. You're not a static creature. Okay. So you probably will need more medicine over time, which is why they designed the escalation to happen. Well, here's what you could do in a perfect world. What if you found your therapeutic level and you find a way to know what your dose is to stay in that green band at all time? But then you have a week where you're like, man, I didn't have side effects, but I got pretty hungry early on, maybe even a day or two after your dose. Okay. The standard protocol would say, well, then double it. Mm-hmm. Okay. It stands to reason. That would put you above your green zone, throw you into side effects, which many people, in fact, probably most people experience when they escalate their dose, right? And put you on that treadmill of increasingly escalating levels. Well, this is what the standard level of the standard dosing protocol does. This is the actual standard protocol. You have 20 weeks of 4 at a time, fixed doses, and then an increase, and then 4 fixed doses and an increase. Would you believe that in that entire 20 weeks, you do not have the same medication experience on any week? Every week.
That to me is the mic drop. So what you're saying here is that if you're following the standard dosing protocol, which is what I just had thrown up on the screen, right? You're 4 weeks on the dose, and then the 5th week you're on a next higher dose. During the entire process, you never have the same amount of drug in your system. So if you're feeling good on a day or a couple day stretch, well, hold on, because it's all changing within a matter of a couple days.
Correct. And so that is the tragedy of this, is everyone has their own level where they feel their best at one moment in time. And even though that target may change over time, the standard dosing protocol does not ask the question and provides no way of answering it or holding, even if you could figure out the answer. Okay. Well, I realized this. I basically, took a week, cracked open some pharmacology textbooks, and had some conversations with ChatGPT, talked to some pharmacists, and figured out, okay, what are the equations? Could I calculate my level based on, if I knew all my previous doses and I put them in accurately, can I calculate that level? Well, turns out you could. So I figured that piece out. Then I set out to answer the next question: is at any given time, can I calculate how much to take to get back to that level that I felt good at? And turns out the answer to that is yes, too. So when and this is before, trust me, I hadn't built an app yet. This was me in Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Okay. One dose at a time. Okay. For me, for my regimen. Well, it turns out you can do it, and it's world changing, because you can figure out where you feel your best, and you can actually calculate on a rolling dynamic basis where you want to be. Well, I retired from the ER. I opened my own clinic, and I started basically, finding patients to see if this worked, not just for me, but for others as well. Okay. And for a whole year, not thinking long-term, really, just thinking for my individual patients in front of me. If we can do this, if we can calculate your level, figure out the right dose to get you to your therapeutic range, and increase by a smaller increment every time you plateau, not doubling the dose, but just nudging it up. And the average nudge in our practice is 2%. Okay. 2% increase. Okay.
So for tirzepatide, the standard dose escalation, I mean, you go from 2.5 to 5, you're increasing your dose 100%.
That's 100%, right?
But
and
you're
after
doing
that,
2%.
correct. So a 10x at least, increase in resolution. Okay. Well, it turns out a 2% increase for most people is enough to break a plateau. Okay.
And these are, just to pause right there. Yeah. When you say this patient population that's responding to this therapy and that are following the protocol are not diabetic, correct?
Some of them were, some of them were not. Okay.
Did you notice a difference in terms of how much you had to crank the dose up with a diabetic versus a non-diabetic to respond?
To be honest, not really.
Really?
Okay. The primary differentiator is the starting weight. People that are at a much greater body weight overall typically require high doses of medicine to find that therapeutic effect. People that are relatively lower in weight, so BMIs of 30 or around there, typically respond to doses that are like literally a fraction of the standard dose. That's Mary Alice, okay? Because we found her level and dropped it. Her next dose after that 1 milligram dose, which was 3 units in an insulin syringe, her next dose was 1 unit.
Wow.
Okay. A 10th of the starting dose. And wouldn't you know, this is, again, trying not to bury the lead. 3 months later, she had lost her 30 pounds. And guess what? She never even reached the starting dose. Wow. She never took 2.5 milligrams at one time of tirzepatide ever in her entire course of treatment. And guess what? Wow. We tapered her down. We transitioned to maintenance, and her maintenance dose was about a third of the starting dose of tirzepatide. Had she gone to a typical doctor with the recipe in front of them, they would have started her on 2.5. She would have been sick as a dog and either quit or had a miserable experience for the next 3 months, lost that 30 pounds, 2-to-1 lean mass to fat mass, and looked and felt terrible in the end, right? Mm-hmm. That is the outcome for so many with standard dosing. And we have to find a way to individualize that, because, if there are people that only need a 10th of the starting dose, we have to find a way to identify them and to adjust their dosing to match their needs. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and obviously this is a big problem, because I think, if I were to find a reason to push back on what you're saying here and look at the clinical trials and say, well, why didn't they investigate this in the clinical trials? If there's any pushback, you can look at the post-marketing data. Whether our community likes this or not, people don't stay on these drugs long-term. Like, a lot of times they'll go back to them over time, but the discontinuation rate of these drugs is something that the industry is really wrestling with.
Yeah, it's the major headline this year. Okay, 40 to 70% attrition. Okay, because of about equally split side effects and cost.
Sure.
Okay. Here's the, mic drop for that. Those two are related.
Yeah.
If you jack up your dose and you're taking more medicine, you're spending a lot more money and you're probably experiencing a higher degree of side effects. And potentially, and this is the key to understand, potentially without any actual increase in the rate of weight loss for that spend. Okay. In our clinic, we did a retrospective on our first 112 patients that we dosed with precision dosing, finding their level, finding their minimum effective level for the medicine and dosing them to that over time. They lost weight faster than the trials. Okay. They lost weight at a rate of 1.1 to 1.3 times at a time matched interval from what the landmark trials showed. But guess what? They used 50% of the medicine.
Wow.
So they took less medicine and they lost more weight. Well, how is that possible? Well, the standard dosing ladder, if you overdose, is malignant to muscle mass and really dangerous to your metabolism. Okay. So you'll reach a plateau earlier if you are losing muscle mass and losing metabolism and not getting enough nutrition, and you'll hit an early plateau that you wouldn't have otherwise. Well, what's the only solution that the standard dosing ladder has for that? Double your dose. Well, that's going to make the problem worse. Okay. To make the problem better, you find the minimum effective level and you don't go above that unless you have to. Okay. Allow your body to lose weight at that 1 to 2 pounds per week that is sustainable. Avoid side effects. And if you have side effects, realize those have a cost. If you can't eat for a week, that has a cost. It has a metabolic cost. It has a muscle mass loss. It has a nutrition cost. Okay. So don't stay there. Go down a little bit. Okay. Well, that isn't possible in the current prescriptive pathway. Okay. So suffice to say, that was our experience in that first year. I began to realize that this is a solution. I'm not saying it's the solution. There are other ways to solve this problem of overdosing. Many clinics are experimenting on their own with microdosing and splitting dosing and finding ways to match this experience to the dose better. But I'm not aware of anyone that's doing it with a degree of visibility and precision that our method utilizes. Because if a doctor says, well, let's just not go up as much. Well, that's better than doubling your dose, but you're still going to stack. You're still going to have a little bit of a different increase, with each dose of that. And it's very difficult to find a stable, reproducible experience on a dose-to-dose basis without actually being able to see your level. And, thank you for bringing up this graphic. This is in our current application that we built to actually make this possible because, providers are not going to calculate every patient's levels and every dose every week like I had to do for a year. Okay. That is not scalable.
Wow.
Okay. So you need technology to make this visible. Well, what does our application do? It calculates in real time how much medicine is in you right now. Okay. That's that green line. The purple line, that's your target. We call it my level just as a way to communicate the information to lay people. But you say, what is your ideal level? Well, that's what that number is. We split the total dosing range, 0 being off, no medicine, 50 being the level you would reach if you took 15 milligrams once a week or 2.4 milligrams once a week, whatever that calculated level is from the standard dosing, the max. That's what we set as the ceiling. We don't want to go above that because that's not been really studied. But in between that, we split that therapeutic level into 50 steps. Okay, wow. 50 steps. So when you increase, you're going 2% up the ladder. Now, this is critical. Not 2% increase in your dose, 2% increase in your experience. Okay, I want it to be a little stronger. Well, how much stronger? You go up 1, it's 2%. You go up 2, it's 4%. We actually put up a warning label if you go up more than 3, because most people don't need an increase bigger than that, and they may experience side effects. Okay, so with this, within the first few weeks, with supervision, with a provider who cares and understands this method, you can find your ideal level. You can find that sweet spot. It usually only takes a couple doses. From there, you put a pin in it. This is my personal level. This is where I feel my best. Every dose I take, no matter whether it's early, whether it's late, whether it's on time, whether it's, 2 days before a trip because you don't want to take your medicine with you, or 2 days after a trip because you got back and forgot to take your medicine with you. It always calculates and tells you, how much do I take to get right back to where I felt? What happens right now in those scenarios? Well, doc, I'm traveling. Can I take it early? Sure. Well, what happens? You just overdosed because it stacked up more than you predicted before. If you took the standard fixed dose early, your level got too high. Now you're sick on your cruise. Strong work. Or you say, I'm not going to take it. I want to take it later and catch up. Well, how much do you take to catch up? If you take your standard dose later, more has been used up, and now you never get back to where you wanted to be.
Right.
So it's chasing a ghost. It's like, where is this perfect level where I feel so good, where my appetite is controlled, that kind of heavenly place that we're all looking for? Well, if you can visualize it and know what it is, you can actually calculate how much to take to get there. That's what we've innovated. That's what we've rolled out to our patients in my clinic. And we're, moving as quickly as we can to make this available to any provider who wants to dose their patients with precision, and to any patient that wants to have a consistent day-to-day control over their GLP-1 experience. And this is what I'll say just in summary of this component. GLP-1s, when dosed with precision, and when you have control and visibility, they can be, remember my provider that said they're magic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out they are, if you can turn them and adjust them like a dial, where you say, I want a little more control. I want a little more room. I'm having an event coming up that I'd like to enjoy. Let your levels drop a little bit further and then catch up with precision later. It becomes like a thermostat dial for your appetite that can be utilized to actually do what? To find that place of balance where I'm not having to obsess over my appetite, but I also can live life. I'm not controlled by the medicine. Like, we've all had that experience, right? I go to barbecue. I really want to eat that today, but I can't. If I do, I'll get sick. That's the medicine driving the ship. Instead of you saying, you know what? This moment in my life is important. I want a little more room. I want to enjoy that. Can I do that with precision and then catch up in a way that is visible and reproducible next time? Well, nobody's doing this. Why? Because it takes a lot of math and it's really hard. And you have to find a way to make it easy and simple, both for providers and for patients. And I believe that we have come up with a solution that makes it possible for almost anyone.
Yeah, not only that, but even some of the most seasoned folks who have been in the community for a long time don't understand, just the basic elements of the pharmacokinetics of the drug and the way that it built one dose builds on another. And I think, I had never even considered the fact that during the titration process, you're never going to experience the same amount of drug in your system. Not one time.
That's insane.
Crazy.
But and I want to give a shout back out to industry. It was a brilliant design for a study, because if they had thrown everyone on the max dose right away, no one could have tolerated
Nobody
the drug.
stayed on the trial, right?
They did a fabulous job for assessing efficacy, for proving that it does work at these defined population levels. The study just wasn't designed to answer the question for the individual. And here's why they haven't done it: because big studies cost a lot of money. And this, precision process that I've described to you is not possible without technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a pretty far bridge to cross when you have a medicine that on a population-wide basis is working pretty well. But here's the challenge: it actually isn't working well. That's what we've discovered the past year. People can't stay on them. They're having unnecessary side effects. They're having outcomes that are inconsistent with the goals of the drug. And so therefore, we need to find out a new paradigm, run the studies, get the data, figure out a way to use these tools with precision. I use this example all the time. A sledgehammer, incredibly important tool in construction. You can drive in a railroad spike, basically into steel with it. Well, that's pretty cool. But if you miss and hit your ankle, you'll break every bone in your leg. Okay? That is the best description I can think of a GLP-1. When dosed with precision, it makes the impossible possible. But when dosed with imprecision, it makes the impossible inevitable and comes with it a host of undesirable side effects and outcomes. And so we have to figure out a way to use these tools in a way that is effective, but also safe. And unfortunately, it's different from person to person. There's no single answer. We have to find a way to make it precise for every individual.
Yeah. I've always loved the idea of incremental dosing and the sort of variety, or variety is not the right word, but the utility of a multi-use vial that you're able to get through compound pharmacies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Lilly has gotten approval for both Zepbound and Mounjaro in multi-use vials, but have yet to release them. I think, how do you kind of see this in the real world playing out? Like, let's say compounds became a little bit more difficult to obtain when so many of these drugs are in fixed dose pens.
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. So let's get into the compounding question just a little bit. Okay, compounding serves an essential function within the pharmaceutical industry, and it serves a function that by definition has to pass 2 tests. Okay, well, actually, there's 3 options. One is shortage. There's not enough medicine to go around. Well, the FDA has said, if there's not enough meds to go around, then yeah, we're going to let pharmacies make their own. Okay, it fills a critical need. Okay, we all experienced that, a couple of years ago when semaglutide was in shortage, where diabetics just couldn't get it. Okay, well, that's not acceptable. Compounding fills that role. But what is the other bucket that compounders can fill? It is patients with a medical need for something different from the commercial formulation and require a dose that is different from the commercial formulation. Okay, well, this is my banner to wave about that. Real patients. Mary Alice, she didn't need 2.5 milligrams of tirzepatide. In fact, that would have been a horrific experience for her. In fact, she didn't even need 1 milligram. She needed a fraction of that to have the drug's intended outcome. Okay, that need can't be met by the commercial formulation currently. If we tried to stuff her into that box, she would have been deathly ill and had a really negative experience and probably quit the drug. Okay, which I know is not the intention of the pharmaceutical manufacturers either, right? So she had a documented medical need, okay, because she couldn't tolerate the standard dose. And the dose we gave her was certainly, greater than 10% different than the commercial formulation. That's just one example of many, okay? The question is, how do you identify those people? Right? How do you figure out who the commercial formulation will work for and who they won't? Okay. My answer to that, in naked self-interest here, is I think using a tool like mine to find their precise level and assess, is this a person who the commercial formulation will work for? If so, fantastic. I don't have a beef with commercial drugs. In fact, they're amazing. Thank you, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, for making these tools possible. Okay, for patients that your formulations work for, I want them to go to you. Okay, but for patients that your formulations don't work for, they need an option. And my ask of the pharmaceutical industry is, please provide us that option. Don't make us choose between compounded meds and a commercial formulation.
Really,
okay?
Release the vials.
That would solve a huge component of the problem. Okay. Yeah. In the current environment, it's not met by that. And I believe there is a huge subset where it is not medically appropriate to do the standard dosing ladder. They have a documented medical need for something different, and compounders legally should be able to fill that gap. Okay? The challenge is you actually have to take care of the patient. You have to know the patient. You have to look into their experience and understand it. And that is the gap that a lot of telehealth companies are not filling. Okay, if you just write a script for someone you never seen or talked to and don't have any visibility into their experience, it's hard to meet that 2-part test. But if you have some technology that can give you a window into that experience, then you can justify it, and not just to justify it because it's real, because they need it, because they need something different to succeed, right?
Yeah.
If someone from the industry out there is listening or watching, okay, give me a call. Let's figure out how to make this type of precision dosing, whether it's via my tool or somebody else's tool. We have to find a way to solve this problem for everyone, to make precision dosing available to individuals, not just a population. And if we can, oh my gosh, the benefits. A population that's losing body fat and holding on to muscle mass, that's not suffering from unnecessary side effects, that don't end up sarcopenic and breaking hips from osteoporosis in the elderly population, and also keeping costs down. Because if you take less medicine, you have to buy less of it. In industry, maybe that's not such a great thing. I know they want to make money, but guess what? If you can go from 50% attrition to people staying on the drug, it could be revenue neutral to have a much better outcome.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to encourage, industry to think about is it's not the end of the world if people take less medicine. In fact, it may make everything better for everyone.
Amazing. I think that this is a brilliant strategy and plan that you've come up with here. I think it's a real solve for some really serious issues facing patients who are getting on GLP-1 medications, or even patients who have been on them for a long time and asked a lot of questions about, just is it worth staying on this for the trade-offs, right? And so if you can find that ideal number, and I think the most compelling statement that you've made in this whole interview is that you're never on the same dose twice during the escalation period. Certainly if you camp out on a dose for an extended period of time, then you level off eventually. But for most people, you're never on the same dose twice. But what if you could pinpoint that moment in time where you felt your best, you were getting the results that you wanted and you needed, and then you had the versatility to, like you said, go on and live your life. If it's giving you a good level of appetite suppression, but you're going on a cruise and you want to be able to enjoy food in the way that the medication doesn't allow you to do, go ahead and go off of it, because you have the confidence that you're going to be able to get back to that level.
Yes.
Strategically using the tools that you have. I think it's a brilliant tool. Where are we at in the commercialization of this right now?
Yeah. So, we built it for my clinic. Okay. This was never intended to be, or never envisioned, let's say, to be something for widespread use. We just built it because we wanted to see if it worked and to prove the model, because I thought it might be a better way to do those things. Once we kind of ran our own internal study and saw the outcomes and saw over time, over that first year, just how much of a better experience patients were having, of course, how could I then say, we'll just keep this to ourselves? I want my goal, my dream is for this to become the standard of care. Probably not just for GLP-1s, but for any long-acting medicine. Okay, we don't have time probably in this podcast to get into it, but testosterone can be dosed the same way. We fight the same battles with peaks and troughs and inconsistencies, and trying to find that ideal level and dose. It's really just an inversion and opening your mind to a different way of thinking. It's not the dose; it's the therapeutic level. How do we find it? How can we see it? How can we dose to that? And how can we adjust it? Well, we are to the point where we have a platform that can be utilized by other clinics. If you're a clinic or a clinician who's interested in this, please reach out to me directly. We'll talk about it. We are working very hard, and by we, I mean myself and my very small, humble clinic team, to get this to the point where it's something scalable, where anyone who wants to use it can use it. We're also, of course, investigating what does it take to have this be compliant and safe at scale, right? Sure. We're getting together an IRB trial to validate this method prospectively, not just retrospectively looking back, to make sure that it's A, does what we think it does, but B, to be so that other clinicians and providers can feel confident that this is the way to go. So it is available for use right now with certain limitations. My goal is in the next 6 months to have a large scale IRB trial to validate this method that other clinics can then join, because that gives us the ability to do this and use this tool in a way that kind of passes muster with the FDA, because we don't want apps practicing medicine. This is not what this app does. All of these things are effected and supervised by the supervising physician. That is critical to mention here. This is not, hey, patients, you can, do whatever you want.
Dose yourself
with this medicine. That is not what this technology does. It gives visibility to the patient and to the provider, so we can see what that next dose should be. When a patient requests an increase or desires an increase, the provider can approve that, and it automatically does all the math. That's what this technology does, is it takes the hard work out of precision dosing and leaves the patient with a very simple, yes or no. Do I feel good? Do I want to go up? Do I want to go down? Do I want to take doses a little more frequently? And the provider has, perfect visibility into that same information. It collects side effect info. It collects, patient experience, and allows us to actually take care of the individual patient.
That's amazing. If people want to give you a follow and kind of keep tabs on what you're doing in the progression of all this, what's the best place for people to find you, Dr. Ian?
Yeah, so that handle right there at VoaFitMD, that's my handle on almost every social media platform. I have a private social media page that maybe we can post in the comments here as well. That's where I post most of my own personal thoughts on this. And then our website, voafit.com, VOAFIT.com. That's where I have a full description of the MyLevel method. We have our white paper posted there, all the data sets that we've used to validate this method, as well as going through the reasons and rationale in detail for people that want to learn more about this method. So voafit.com is a great place for that. And you can email me directly, MD, medical doctor, at voafit.com. That's certainly the most direct line to me. I believe my office phone number is posted on the website as well. I welcome conversations both from patients that are interested, providers who are interested in utilizing or learning more about this tool, or just discussing and brainstorming how do we make precision medicine possible at scale. And then certainly people in the research industry, I would love to have those connections. I am not a researcher by training or trade. I am a clinical physician who had an idea that I think might be something important. But if there are people in the industry that are willing to join forces and really validate this method, I welcome those phone calls. And then people in the industry as well, from the pharmaceutical companies. My goal is to help, everyone to be able to succeed on these medicines and to help them reach their amazing potential that I think is being squandered by a dosing protocol that doesn't individualize the treatment. So
yeah,
I'd love any conversations
pharma
about
companies. That. I would challenge pharma companies to consider this method in their clinical trials in the future. I think this would be a great way to personalize medicine, to leverage technology to personalize medicine when it comes to these drugs, and a real big solve, as you said, to the attrition, the drop-off rates on GLP-1 medications, because that is something that the industry badly, I'm surely, wants to address. And this accomplishes that, and it delivers a personalized experience to patients that I think would make their experience much more efficient with these medications. And I think that that's great for everyone.
So let me, at the risk of getting too personal, let me take this back to your experience.
Yeah.
Right? Your experience, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you were escalated very quickly to the max allowable dose in order to, in theory, from a good place of mind, effect the most possible weight loss in your situation.
Yeah.
Okay. The outcome, unfortunately, is you forced your body to adapt to a very high dose very quickly and made it very difficult for you to sustain weight loss over time and to quit the drug. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you can bring up the document one more time and scroll down, I just want to bring up that slide where it's the difference between the standard dosing protocol and how escalation can happen in the MyLevel method. So go down, right? Keep going all the way down. Keep going.
Going back to the beginning, or?
No, all the way down to the bottom.
Oh, to the end. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Keep going. Right there. Up. There we go. Okay. Now, this is not a real patient's data. This is a representation of what it's like to find an ideal level early, which you can see if you can zoom in with your eyes, is lower than the first peak. Okay, this is representative of someone like Mary Alice. Okay, where we found that perfect level, and there was adaptation over time. You did need more medicine over time, but you only needed 2% more, not 100% more, 50% more, 25% more. Well, over time, that delta or difference between those peaks in the standard protocol and the peaks in the MyLevel protocol, that represents savings in cost, savings in metabolic adaptation, where you're not forcing your body to adapt to a higher level of drug. And it also results, of course, in lower side effects, because that's primarily determined by your medication load. Well, here's the key. How many weeks did it take you to get to 15 milligrams? Do you remember?
16 maybe.
Okay. That is so fast. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to the top of that escalation protocol early.
Yeah.
Within 16 weeks. Well, once you're there, you have nowhere to go.
Right.
You have no option. Okay. Your body's adapted to that high level. If you start to quit, if you try to quit, your body screams at you, says, no, like I need this much medicine to maintain appetite control. You get ravenous. You have a very high risk of regain. Okay. Well, what if you got to that same 16 weeks dosed with precision? If you can see on that scale, the difference between the peak at 15 and the peak where you could be potentially on precision dosing. Well, now let's say you do adapt and you need more. You have years of runway,
right,
to utilize the incredible benefits of these medicines. I have patients that have been on this medicine with this method for 2 years, and they're still at 7.5. Okay, because they didn't need any more. Okay, but this is the key, and I wanted to tie this up here at the end in a bow. When it's time to get off, it makes it possible because you haven't forced your body to adapt to such a high dose. It makes it easier to gradually titrate and step down and allow your body to rewire to stay for 6 to 8 months at a maintenance dose and then gradually taper down to where your body can maintain that new set point. Okay. It is possible. And the best example I can give you of that is me. I used to wake up in the morning every morning and eat 2,500 calories before 10 o'clock. My appetite was absolutely ravenous. It was like the battle of my life to just keep that calorie number down to maintenance or below. Well, and that's where I would, you overeat and then you overly restrict. And that's where I would end up running marathons after Thanksgiving, is trying to manage this appetite. Well, after a few years of precision dosing and titrating down carefully and precisely, guess what? I don't need to take a GLP-1 anymore. And I also, you know how many calories I have on an average breakfast? About 400 or 500. And do you know that I can maintain my weight without that? I'm not saying that will happen for everyone, but it is possible. It's possible if you don't relentlessly escalate someone to a high dose and make it impossible for them to come off. The beauty of these drugs is if you can dose them precisely, titrate off intelligently, and not overdo it in the middle, people have a chance of actually not needing them in the future. And if they do need them in the future, this is so key. They may not need 15 milligrams a week, which is really expensive. Okay. Right. People are quitting due to cost. If you can reach your goal weight and find maintenance on a fraction of the ending dose of the trials, you can stay on that longer. You don't have to quit due to cost. So that's what precision dosing makes possible. My dream is to make that possible at scale.
Yeah, I would love to see how the data ultimately shakes out in some larger studies here. I think that you're onto something, and I think that it will be successful. And so I'll be eager to see how that all pans out, and hopefully we'll be able to connect you with some folks that can catch the vision too. I would hope that some folks within earshot are listening.
So I'll name drop a few groups that I'm working with right now, really because they have been an incredible help in moving this forward. So Aurora Health and Aesthetics is one group. They've been incredibly instrumental in helping us move this forward. NextGen MD 360, they're an amazing clinic that has helped us as well. Scripts.co is one as well. And there's some smaller clinics like Crux Point Health Solutions in Denver, Colorado, and some other groups as well. Stryker Pharmacy, I need to mention them as well. They've been incredibly receptive to the concept and idea of precision dosing. But it's just the beginning. My goal is to have this be a universal tool that anyone can access to take better care of their patients. And that's where we're heading. And I hope, it's met with receptiveness in the industry for sure.
Amazing. Dr. Ian Ellis, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today. I think this is an exciting thing to think about. And I think a natural sort of evolution of the space towards genuinely personalized medicine when it comes to this stuff. I just don't think by and large everybody fits into that clinical trial box. and this is a out of the box way of looking at it. So kudos to you and what you're creating there. I can't wait to watch how it all unfolds.
Well, thank you. And I'll just say this, this is a solution. I'm not saying it's the solution. There may be other ways, other minds, other creative ways to personalize these medicines. That is the goal here. It's not to use a particular tool, a particular app, particular technology, but as an industry, that is my passion. It was my passion when I was 14 years old. We have to solve this obesity crisis, which is absolutely killing our country, literally.
Mm-hmm.
GLP-1s are the best tool that has ever been invented to make a dent in that gargantuan task, but they are being squandered by the way people are being dosed. We have to find a solution. I would love to be a part of that solution, but I would also welcome conversations with other thinkers who can be creative, because the status quo is not working well enough for enough people.
It's definitely not working as well as it could be. I know that folks will watch this in our community, these, hardcore GLP-1, from my cold, dead hands, will you ever try it? But the reality is there's an even greater number of people out there who have yet to try these drugs, and a equal number of people who are quitting them, and quitting them before they reach their goals that the drug ultimately could help them reach if it was done appropriately. I think this is a great potential solution, and I'll look forward to see how this
and that's
unfolds.
the beauty, is if you can gain control of the tool, if the medicine is not controlling you, you can gain control of the tool. You don't have to stay on it all the time, but you can get back on it intelligently when you need to. I mean, speaking personally, when my schedule is controlled, when I'm getting enough sleep, when, I'm at home, when I'm exercising regularly, I do not need tirzepatide to maintain my weight. But guess what? Come November, I'm at grandma's house for a month. I'm super stressed at work. I'm not getting enough sleep. I don't have access to my regular exercise routine. I need help. And so it's okay to cycle on and cycle off intelligently and precisely to get you through your actual life. And that's my dream for these medicines, is for them to be a tool that is flexible, that puts you in control of your experience and your appetite, and allows you to, again, in the very beginning, we talked about, okay, you have two choices. Neither of them are good. Either allow yourself to become unhealthy and enjoy your life, or dedicate your life in an obsessive way to fitness and miss out on so many beautiful things that are related to human flourishing. Okay. If you can use this tool with precision, that to me is the way where you can have both. And I'm living proof of that it is possible. My wife can tell you, my kids can tell you, they are so happy that I am not on the treadmill 3 hours a day. I'm not, pulling out a food scale every night at dinner and eating something different than they are. Yeah. I'm not saying, no, I'd rather not go on a vacation to Italy because I'm afraid of focaccia. Okay. That's a real anecdote. I'm not making that up. Okay. That is possible. I'm living proof of it. And I'm not dependent on 15 milligrams of tirzepatide every week for the rest of my life to have that experience. And that's, the best summary statement I can come up with. It's what precision dosing makes possible if we can just find a way for enough people to do it.
Excellent. I really appreciate you sharing today. Thank you for giving some of your time to the channel, and keep us posted on how this evolves.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. It's a true privilege. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ian. Appreciate it.